So in this video, I wanted to show you two different ways of making Plarn and also a small project that I thought would be good for beginners to start with in terms of using Plarn. So basically there's two ways to make Plarn, and one of them I'll call straight cuts. And that's the kind that is a good one to use for when you have grocery bags like this. And then there's another technique that I'll call diagonal cuts. And that's really useful because you can do that with narrower bags. Like this is a newspaper bag, this is a bread bag, this is a bag that clothing came in the mail. So it enables you to utilize more kinds of bags. So more opportunities to recycle and upcycle. The first one I'm going to show you is the straight cut technique. And so you take your plastic bag, and just make sure it's a clean bag, a dry bag, and just straighten it out a little bit. And then you're just going to fold it a few times. And it's good to use scissors that are pretty sharp so that you have clean cuts. Trim off the very end of the bag where it's connected at the bottom. And then just make cuts depending on the kind of project that you're going to do. I think about an inch. That's a pretty good one for the smaller project that we're going to work on next. So I'm just cutting all the way through, straight across. Doesn't have to be exact. One great thing about working with Plarn is that it's really forgiving in terms of things not having to be exactly even or done perfectly, which is always handy because I personally don't have very much experience crafting, and I learned how to do all this yesterday. So if I can figure out how to do this, I'm sure anybody can. Okay, so what you come away with using that technique are loops of plastic. And then when you're going to make the Plarn, which is plastic yarn, oops, something happened here. We'll set that aside for the other technique. So here are the two loops, and then you're just basically going to run one through itself to connect them. And don't pull it too tight because they can actually snap. Let me show that to you again. And when you're doing this, you want to make sure that the two lengths are even for what you'll be working on later for a project. So when you add the next one, just make sure you grab it from the center. And I'm holding the one at the center, and then I'm wrapping this inside itself, pulling through to make sure I get pretty much near the middle. And you can fix it like I just did to straighten it out. And what's nice about this too is that if you're working on a project, you might not know how much Plarn you'll need. So the first time you're doing it, you can just keep adding Plarn as you go, and that way you won't have a tangle of Plarn. So I'm going to set all of this to the side because we'll use that for our project. And then the second way to make Plarn, I'll show you here on this newspaper bag. It's similar to the other technique, except that you're creating a spine in the back that's going to serve to connect all of the pieces together instead of making separate loops. So just like with the other, you're folding it, but you're not folding it all the way to the top. You're folding it part of the way, and then you're leaving this backbone here. So again, you're going to snip off the closed end, and then you're going to just make those similar. I just made a mistake. You're not doing that. You're going to cut through, just to cut through where you overlapped, but to leave this top edge uncut, because then that'll act as the spine. So again, so I cut that a little bit close to the spine, so I'm going to be a little more careful. Cutting it right to the edge of the overlap. Edge of the overlap, and then you keep going. And it's nice when you're working on a Plarn project to have plastic that comes in a few different colors, if you happen to have that for the bags that you're trying to recycle. Okay. Okay, so that part's finished. So then when you open it up, we'll start on the other end. You'll see here where it's all connected along that spine. And then what you need to do is separate the pieces into lines. So what we're going to do is we're going to make a diagonal cut so that you're cutting between the two rows of cuts. So here's that first loop we cut, and then I'm going down to the second, and then I'm cutting from that second one diagonally to the first. And you see, then it separates it out into a separate line. And then right here on the end, we're just going to also snip that. That's that first loop. And there you go. You have a line that you've started. And what we're going to do is we're going to keep going down the entire spine. And then it unfurls into that single line of Plarn. Just keep going. Okay, and so just to not keep you waiting, I already cut one completely. And so you'll end up, the very bottom has another one of these complete loops, so I'm just going to snip that free. So now when you're connecting these two pieces of single line together, what you're going to do is you're going to, let's straighten this one edge out. You're going to create a little hole in the middle and then run the next piece of plastic, let me get an end here, through that little hole and through itself to connect it. So let me show you. So you're folding it lengthwise and then you're folding it along the width. So you're creating a little inside corner and you're going to snip that. And then that's how you create an interior hole. And you want to keep this a little on the small side just because this material isn't the strongest and you're going to be running something through it, so you want to make sure that it has some strength to it. And then you have another piece of Plarn, and since I didn't finish this, I'll just snip it short and use it as a demonstration. You'll have another long piece of Plarn, and then you do the same thing. You fold it lengthwise, fold it widthwise, make that little snip to make the hole. There you go. So what you're going to do is you're going to take one tip that's not cut, run it through the end that is cut, run it through that hole, hold the hole itself just to stabilize it a little bit again because it's not the strongest thing. And then you're running that line through. And then when you get to the hole on the piece that you're adding, you're going to run the piece that you're adding through the hole and slide it through again. And then you've connected it. And again, just tighten it gently because it's not the strongest point right there. And don't worry about the fact that there's a little bit of extra material here because again, when you're working on a project, they end up kind of blending together. And then when you're going to add another piece of Plarn on this end, you can just snip this end and then make another hole and just repeat that process. So basically the difference between the two different techniques of making Plarn, this makes a single strand of Plarn, and it allows you to use much narrower pieces of plastic without any trouble. And then the technique I showed you, the first, it creates a two-strand piece of Plarn. So this, as you can imagine, is going to be a little bit stronger, a little bit bulkier, so it might be good for projects like making, these are advanced projects, making a shoulder bag, a reusable grocery bag, and if you have experience knitting or crocheting, you might want to go ahead and look that up on YouTube and find a project. There are some good ones out there that show you how to do that. The single strand is something that you might want to use for a smaller project. Today we're going to do a little project I figured out by watching a yarn video and adapting it. So it was a video on how to make a coaster out of yarn with finger crocheting. I wanted to put together a project that didn't require you to have any special tools and that could be done pretty quickly and easily. And so this was basically made out of maybe 10 pieces of this. We'll figure that out because it actually shrank a little bit more than I expected. And then I finger crocheted it into a round, and then I ironed it with an iron set on cotton between two pieces of parchment paper. And parchment paper is the kind of sheet you use baking when you're making cookies that are kind of sticky, or putting it down as a layer when you're making a cake. So that might be somewhere in your kitchen, but it's very easy to get it at the grocery store. And as I said, this did shrink about 20%, so this time I'm going to make it a little bit bigger, but it still is just fine as a coaster. And just make sure that when you're letting this cool, you keep it flat. Maybe keep it inside the parchment paper and put a book on top, because I was trying to see if this worked pretty quickly. I took it out before it cooled. So this is the project that we're going to do, and I'm going to use the two-strand twine. And like I said, a lot of the Plarn projects are based on knitting or crocheting techniques. And at first I wanted to do a crocheting project, but I didn't have a crochet hook and I don't know how to crochet. So I found another video on YouTube that showed you actually how to make a crochet hook out of different things around the house, including a chopstick, which is what I used for this. You can also make it out of a pencil, and that looked a little bit easier. But I thought it might be nice to start with something a little bit simpler, and I felt that after trying finger crocheting for the first time yesterday, that was pretty straightforward and pretty easy and quick to pick up.